Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 10th episode. That's a great achievement. We are really excited to have you with us today. For some of you who are here for the first time, what is Scaling Impact all about? It is a program put together by two companies, MediaShock as well as Scalar. We actually want to empower organizations, founders who are keen to grow in the APAC market with the knowledge from those who have actually walked the talk. So all the guests that we bring on this show have actually walked the talk on the grounds, have some battle scars, have lots of learning lessons that you can glean from so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. Right? So whether you're exploring to grow in Southeast Asia or the larger APAC market, maybe you're currently based in the US or the Europe and you want to tap into the one of the largest market and most fast-growing market in the world of APAC, we want to share the experience from others, right? So you can bring forth your innovative ideas and succeed in this very diverse market of APAC. Unfortunately, my partner in crime, so I usually look over here. He's not here with us today. He's down with food poisoning. But the show must go on. So the success of a webinar series is showing up, being regular, showing up month after month. So that's what we are doing here. MediaShock helps companies in the tech space communicate your complex ideas with effective and engaging messaging. So together we can help your technology achieve impact and improve the world we live in. So how do we do this? We do this using explainer videos, infographics, as well as multi-language webinars. So when you decide to get into APAC, you already have localized materials that your audience, they can be local partners, they can be end clients, clearly understand your offerings, and it will increase your odds of success greatly as you scale into APAC. So as for Scalar, Scalar focuses on technology companies. They can be startups or scale-ups, and they have demonstrated a focus to grow both locally and internationally. So this is done via 3 strategic trusts, go-to-market consulting. Scalar will help you figure the best plan to succeed in your new market that you want to grow into. Second, recruitment. Scalar is great at helping you figure out and actually hire your landing team. They will help you save money, not hiring the wrong person that you probably need to remove in 2 months' time. Right? And the third way they do it is via board advisory. The best way to grow your business is to have on your team other seasoned folks who have succeeded in the same market that you are trying to conquer. The Scalar will help you bring on board them as board advisors through the great network that they really laid foundation on. Right. So in the last episodes, in all the other episodes that we have done, our goal is to really bring on speakers and business leaders with valuable on-the-ground experience in this series called Scaling APAC. So if you know someone whose experience and stories could benefit our audience in our series, please reach out to us, drop us a note, and we can invite them for the next episode. So today's topic is something that we are all very familiar with while we want to expand in a new market. And you can't say that you have expanded into a new market without winning deals and closing sales. So having a sales development rep, someone who does sales, it doesn't have to be done exactly by the one with the title, but that is so crucial. So this episode we have Chua. He's the founder of Revenue Journey. He'll be drawing on his extensive first-hand experience in helping businesses of various sizes expand into APAC. Revenue Journey is a go-to market consultancy and empowers his solutions with lots of automation as well. So you can get your leads and grow your market here. So without further ado, Asher is here to share some of his secret sauces, some of his great stories with us. So please join us in welcoming Asher Chua.
If you're thinking of expanding into Asia Pacific or APAC, what are the common problems and pitfalls that may happen, especially if you're unfamiliar with this region? Most companies who decide to expand into the Asia Pacific region never even turn a profit, even at the end of 2 years being here. How do you avoid being one of them? So these are companies who are primarily based in the US, in the UK, in Europe, and they are trying to expand into Asia Pacific for the first time. My experience revolves around being the first or second sales rep on the ground trying to reach out and acquire the first few customers in the new region. And being one of the first few on the ground when it comes to a new lending team, you get to experience in a very direct way both the good and the bad, because I was the one interacting with prospects and clients on a day-to-day basis. So for the rest of this episode of Scaling in APAC, I want to share the 3 most common problems or pitfalls I've personally experienced or heard about and give you insights into the impacts of those problems. Let's start with problem number 1, a general lack of knowledge of the Asia-Pacific region. Now this is especially true for companies who may be primarily based in the US who are looking to expand into APAC for the first time. Because in the US, you could make the argument that most people are homogeneous, they all speak the same language, English being the primary language. And you could even argue that it doesn't matter if you sell to the East Coast or to the West Coast. While English is used as the main language of communication when it comes to official business relationship between these countries, many of them still like to conduct business in their own languages. And there are so many of them that we can get into. And other than languages, we also have to consider cultures as well as the level of maturity when it comes to buying your type of solution. Depending on the type of industry and the type of service or solution that you're offering, different countries have different levels of maturity. Let's take an example. Imagine if you're selling a software that is cloud-based and you find out that there are some companies in certain sectors that are highly regulated. They are probably not ready for cloud. They are probably still using on-premise solutions. And it may take years before changes take place due to other factors that are specific to the country or that region. Many companies in the United States have a direct selling motion, which means that the company gets in contact with the potential customer and sells their solution directly. Now, if you're trying to do that in some emerging countries in this region, like cold emailing or cold calling, you can't even get the contact information to begin with. Or maybe LinkedIn, which is a very popular channel for business communication, is not even big in that country. So you have to change your approach when it comes to even getting the first introductions to potential customers. Partnerships could be something you have to look into first. And understanding this first step is actually vital for APAC expansion, because that will help you determine which are the first markets you want to do an expansion into based on the resources and limitations you have. Here's the second problem that I see: not hiring the right first leader. Now, the first leader that you typically hire for your APAC expansion may be a general manager, or they may be a VP of sales or APAC. I can't begin to tell you how important this person is, because yes, while you have the company culture that you have established in other markets, but when it comes to APAC, a new region, I can tell you that from personal experience, this leader is going to be the one to dictate that culture in this new market, especially in the early days. And not only that, because they are the ones who will often be given the autonomy or a really high level of influence to determine who they want to hire, what roles they want to hire for, what resources they require. All of your strategy, expansion plans, and implementation plans will rise and fall based on this person's decision. And this is where it can get really, really tricky. Because most companies may think, I need someone who actually understands the Asia-Pacific region really well, who has been an established company where they are present in many different markets within APAC. And you may be thinking to yourself, I want to hire those people who are the senior leaders in these companies. But often, that may not be the best choice. This is because some of these senior leaders were able to ride on the brand that has been established by their predecessors. And when you're first coming into a new market like APAC, it's tough because most people may not know your brand. Most people may not even know what you do. You have to be able to get someone who knows how to get you literally from 0 to 1. Not from 10 to 100 or from 100 to 1,000. You're trying to get someone to get you from nothing to something. And in fact, you may not like this, but you probably also want someone who argues back with you regarding the feasibility of an expansion plan that has been decided at the headquarters level. But this person should also be able to give you concrete reasons why. If they do so, that is actually a good sign that they understand the market and the speed that this market operates in, which is normally slower than what you see in the other regions or the other markets. And speaking of hiring, here is problem number 3. I've realized very quickly in my career that for every leader who decides to hire a new headcount, that typically means that they are committing to getting at least a 3 to 5x revenue compared to the cost of hiring that headcount. And the problem is this: when you hire too quickly and you're still not really sure on what is the best way to grow in that new region, you end up with lots of costs from a headcount perspective, and also a really high revenue target that you may not be sure on whether you can achieve. And if you don't show the target achievement in the short term, it's really hard for you to ask for more resources, or it's really hard for you to ask for changes in terms of what you want to execute. So to me personally, if a leader in a new region is just trying to ask for a bunch of budget to hire a bunch of people, I may even argue that that is not the best way forward, because they don't really know what works yet. Even if it works in a previous company, you have to ask yourself, will it really work the same way now? Because things may have changed from then till now. A company was trying to expand into the Asia Pacific region because they wanted to aim for an IPO soon. And expanding into APAC was one of the good indicators that they are ready for an IPO. So when they first came into the region, they wanted to get revenue quickly. So one of the first things they wanted to go for was the government sector, go after the enterprise sectors, where they know they could get a lot of revenue. So they hired a bunch of enterprise sales representatives, people who have experience selling to these big companies and knew how to navigate around the internal politics. But what they didn't realize is this: when you're trying to sell solutions to government organizations or to enterprises, they require quite a few things from a technology or regulatory standpoint. One example is that they may require you to have a local data center. If you don't have that, you can't even get past the RFP process or the request for proposal process. So while you have a bunch of these enterprise sales reps who are really experienced, who are paid really, really well, they can't even execute on their plan simply because they are stopped by something that they couldn't control at all. And the result is this: 1 to 1.5 years later, they had to fire 80% of their workforce in APAC simply because the cost of retaining them is just not sustainable as compared to the revenue that they were bringing in. Even the head of APAC himself was let go. I've also had another experience where I've personally worked under a leader who, in the first few months of being hired as a general manager, personally cold called and emailed the first few prospects himself rather than just hiring a bunch of people to do the work for him. Because it was really important for this leader to understand what's happening on the ground, including the daily frustrations that his team may be facing. This is so he can determine what is the best strategy going forward. Now, he chose to grow sustainably. What did that look like? Firstly, he hired customer success managers, not sales representatives, to take care and grow the existing accounts they already had, because it's always easier to grow an existing customer rather than acquiring a new one. This allowed him to show immediate revenue growth to the headquarters really quickly, so they see the immediate impact that the team has, and it allowed him to ask for more resources. And before hiring a new salesperson, he made sure that the team is already at 100% of their target on a consistent basis or overachieving before they determine that there is capacity for another sales rep to come in. And he made sure that the territory is properly defined as well, because every salesperson would know your territory is a huge factor in whether you can hit your quota. And the result is this: people stay for a really long time. And I'm talking 3 to 5 years on average, because everybody's happy as they are all hitting or close to hitting their quota, and you avoid lots of internal frustrations and issues. So I hope these 2 personal experiences give you a sneak peek into potential problems or pitfall when it comes to expansion into APAC, and gives you a good summary on the 3 things to take note of and how to make sure that you turn a profit within the first 2 to 3 years. For one, make sure that you understand this very diverse region, which is APAC, really clearly before coming here. Number 2, hire the right first leader. And lastly, make sure that you grow sustainably without hiring too quickly. Now, if you do all this well, I believe that you'll have a good time and a very enjoyable time expanding to this amazing region. Opportunities await you.
Okay, Asher, welcome to this current episode of Scaling in APAC. We're really glad to have you join us today. Right, you have lots of experience as a lending team in quite a few successful companies and not so successful ones, right? And things that you have learned from. So I think in this particular episode, we really like to get to know you a little bit better as well as learn some of the ways that a lending team should be structured, or to increase the odds of us succeeding in this case, right? Maybe before that, can we have you introduce yourself?
Yep, definitely. So thanks for having me on, Ming. Really good to be here. But hey everybody, Asher here. So right now I'm the founder of Revenue Journey, which is my own company where I help clients with their go-to-market motions, leveraging modern technologies like Clay, right? That's one of it. But prior to this, as you have mentioned yourself, in the corporate world for close to 5 years, I was part of many fast-growing SaaS companies, software companies, and I was part of the lending team. It means that these companies, they are the ones where they are based primarily in US and UK, Europe, and they were trying to expand into APAC, and I was typically the first or second sales rep on the ground. So it means that it's almost like a startup, because when they first come, actually most of the time you would think that, wow, they're doing big in the US, people here know them. But most of the time not really, like maybe 10% or 5% of people here know them. So you are really operating almost like a startup, almost as if nobody knows your brand. The only difference is, yeah, you have some money backing from the headquarters, right? And there was also a period where I got really passionate about this whole idea of doing sales in APAC, because I realized it's so different from the US, Europe. And I also started to do a podcast back then, right, called the Revenue Journey Podcast, where I interview people who do sales in APAC in different countries, just like what you're doing right now. So that's my experience.
Right, so curious, and then you kind of nailed what I was trying to ask you next, right, is sales in different parts of the region. How do they differ, and especially from a culture and nuance point of view? Maybe are there some distinct stories or distinct observations that you have learned from?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit more, right? Obviously, we can get into a lot of different countries, but back then my experience was mainly selling to specific countries like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia. I've done Indonesia before, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, China. Yeah, I believe these are some of the ones. I can tell you firstly, what I know is not too different from what everybody already knows. For example, language is a thing. When you speak with, let's say, in Australia, New Zealand, English is fine, and you can be a little bit more casual. They like to talk a little bit more before the start of a meeting. Yeah, build a rapport. Singaporeans different. Yes, you speak English, same language, but okay, let's get into details. Let's go straight into it. Malaysia is a little bit different. They like to talk a little bit more, and yeah, they are quite nice, but you need to go down and meet them, right? Yeah, you need to build a relationship, and you need to be prepared to give some discounts also. That's how it is. This is kind of the same for Thailand and Indonesia. Indonesia is also different. If you don't speak Bahasa, it's really tough, because how do you even sell to an enterprise if you don't know? And sometimes if you try to sell a software, and let's say it's a large company, the first thing they will ask you is, Asher, do you have support reps that can converse in Bahasa Indonesia? Why? Because the day-to-day using of the software is not the person who is buying it. It's the people who is on the ground who doesn't speak English really well. So when they have problems, they need to call someone. Who do they call? They need to call you. And we haven't even get to the part about communication. Some countries like Indonesia like WhatsApp. Vietnam likes Zalo, for example. Australia don't use WhatsApp. That's personal. Singapore, okay with WhatsApp. Malaysia, WhatsApp. Taiwan, Line. WeChat for China.
Right. So what are some of the typical mistakes, right, that you have seen, especially for enterprises or large scale ups who have gotten a fair amount of success? They've gotten their own product market fit in their part of the country. Maybe let's start with the US. And they're thinking to land in Singapore as a launch pad for the rest of APAC.
I'll just talk about the number one mistakes, right? And that is trying to replicate whatever you're doing in the US or whichever country they are primarily based in APAC. What do I mean? Let's take US for example. In the US, there is a very strong culture on cold calling, on cold emailing, on LinkedIn. Those are the three main channels generally. People don't really use WhatsApp or Telegram or things like that. Those are three channels. And when they first come into APAC, they'll say, yeah, let's do that. Let's hire a bunch of sales development representatives who will use these three channels. Let's give them those platforms to get data and everything. If you're just expanding to Australia, New Zealand, yeah, I could argue that could still work because it's fairly similar. But the moment you come to Singapore, Malaysia, the more Southeast Asia you go, it doesn't work anymore. Why? Because number one, there is a limitation when it comes to data. All these platforms, and today if you're a salesperson listening to this, you will know the Zoom Info, the Lucias of the world, all these contact data platform, the coverage is so bad when it comes to Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia. So how do you even do a cold calling or cold emailing if you can't even get the information in the first place? That's one. LinkedIn's coverage is pretty good in Australia, maybe New Zealand, maybe Singapore. But again, when you go to Malaysia, again, Southeast Asia, right? The coverage is not good. And we haven't even talked about China. China, they have their own LinkedIn. I can't even remember what it is. They don't use LinkedIn, it's blocked there. When you go into Japan, Korea, yeah, LinkedIn is not big there. So that's the number one problem I see. Treating APAC the same as whichever country they are based in.
Got it. I'm a little bit curious. In terms of, you were saying you had some experience in some of these APAC markets in terms of sales. What are some cultural nuances that we should take note of in order to increase our chances of success?
I'll say this first, right? I think before we even talk about cultural nuances, it's good for us to take a step back and let's also to understand, let's say you are trying to expand to APAC today, what are you willing to give first? If today you are set on saying that, yeah, I want to hire my own people, I want them to be on the ground, and I want to start from there. Then your own limitations is the fact that likely the people that you hire only speak English, right? If you want to bring people from there to here, for example, then your limitations is English. So you start from there. Your limitations is you can only go after Australia, New Zealand, and maybe Singapore for now. And then you learn the nuances of those markets. Yeah. But let's say today you are willing to expand a little bit. You may want to be open to working with partners, local partners. Then I may even argue that you don't really have to care about local nuances because they will do the job for you, right? You just have to make sure that they communicate with you nicely, they are transparent, you give them a good rate. Yeah. Or if you are, and that's what normally I would suggest, right? Try to go for the partner side things first, especially for underdeveloped markets. Because if you try to expand too fast, too quickly, it's going to be very tough. Why? It's not just about nuances, as we talk about, right? Different people communicate a little bit differently, but it's also about what resources do you have. If you want to sell to Indonesia, are you ready to develop your collaterals and content in that local language? Are you willing to change it all to Vietnamese, for example, to Thai? And it's not just about getting someone to translate everything, right? It's also about trying to get someone who can support those people, can sell to those people, not just sell, but support them afterwards. Post-sales, pre-sales, a lot of that. You probably know, even changing content is going to be very tough, even just for one English language. So what more if you try to do it for so many other languages?
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, changing content, sometimes it's not a direct translation. It's also understanding the context. Even for a language as similar as Bahasa Indonesia and Bahasa Melayu, both may look very similar, but only a seasoned professional can understand the cultural nuance when it comes to some of these terms.
Or maybe even Chinese language, right? There's obviously the traditional and simplified. Even that in itself is, like I remember when I went to talk to a Taiwanese customer back then, I visited Taiwan, leisure trip, right? And I say, hey, let's meet for coffee and all. And they tell me as well that, hey, Asher, if we know that if we see firstly your collateral is in simplified Chinese, the first thing I will see is okay, are you even, do you even understand my culture and all of these things? So even small things like this, just changing it from simplified to traditional, that actually works wonders.
Yeah, excellent. I'm actually very, very curious about your lending team experience because I think there is a balance and there is a lot of challenges trying to balance between a startup culture in a lending team approach versus a higher HQ where they already have a structured system. Yeah. How do you balance that? How do you navigate that? Because I can imagine that it's going to be an adventure.
Yeah, I would say this, right? Let's even talk about just the APAC team. You obviously have your people on the ground, people like me, the salespeople talking to customers. You have the managers, you have the directors, and sometimes you may even have a GM. And that's the thing, right? I would say that majority of the time, I don't really get to dictate how the relationship is like between the HQ and APAC. It is probably my boss job. But what I do feel is the impact. If it's done well, if it's not done well. Yeah, I get to experience everything. I think in terms of juggling, it's tough because exactly like you said, HQ has established certain protocols, certain processes, and sometimes they almost force everyone to do the same, regardless which region you are in. That goes all the way to the tools that you use. That goes all the way to the messaging you use. I've been at companies where they force you to use certain messaging. I've been at companies where they force you to make the same amount of cold calls as what they are doing in the US. But again, you don't have the same level of access of data, right? So how do you do that? It's really tough, I have to say. And I think this is really, if I can put it bluntly, the job of the head of APAC to fight for his rights, per se, to fight for what he believes makes sense for his market and to justify. And it's tricky to balance that, right? Because to be able to push back to the HQ, maybe in the first few months it's easy because they don't know they rely on you. But 1 year in, if you're not showing some type of revenue, you're losing money, it's very hard for you to push back. And I've had personal experience seeing ones that push back really well and almost being willing to lose their job over it because they really believe in pushing it. And they just believe that, no, you shouldn't take the same approach here. I've seen those ones, but I've also seen ones where it's a job at the end of the day, right? You know, they don't want to push things too much such that it creates friction, and they maybe just say yes to 80% of the things. And again, that's why I say I'm the one that receives all the impact and everything that comes out of it. Yeah, so that's what I would say from my personal experience.
Right. So I heard briefly about your story on some successful companies that you've been in who did things right from the start in terms of putting in the right person in their lending team. Can you share with me a little bit of experience in that, and how did that feel on yourself personally, and how did it feel with the customer relationship and eventually revenue for the company?
So to answer your question, I'll say this. This is my very first company. So the very first company I joined back then was a company called Impact. My general manager back then I reported to was this guy called Antoine, French guy, but has been in Singapore for a very long time. So his approach was very different, right? I was a fresh graduate. I was someone who, I want to come in, I want to grow. Let's do more. Let's do this. Let's do that. But because I was young back then, and I wanted to say, hey, why not I just try to go into this market? Why not? I have so many ideas in my head. And he always come back to me and say, Asher, are we ready for that market? Are we ready for that? Okay, hey Asher, I know you want to keep getting these customers, you want to talk to a lot of these customers, but are they the right fit? So what he taught me, which I didn't know back then, was he went back to fundamentals. Fundamentals being, what is our exact ideal client profile? How do they look like? Not just from a company industry perspective, not just from a company size perspective, but he taught me things such as, Asher, do you know that yes, while in the US they can sell to companies of these sizes, but in Southeast Asia we got to do things differently. Other than looking at the company level information, we need to look at the persona information. What does that mean? It means that we need to see whether this maybe head of marketing, are they those that is experimental? Because we're selling a new kind of technology that requires educating a little bit. We need to target the people who are willing to try new things. I can't really remember what's that graph called, but there's the early adopters, there's those people. He tells me that you had to target those people first. And only once we get them, then when people start to see, wow, we have these brands, then the others will follow. So it taught me a lot of fundamentals that, again, when I was young back then, right, I didn't know. Because to me, I'm just like, why are we taking it so slow? I just want to go. But only after I've been, later in my career, I've seen different situations. Then I realized it was so wise of him back then. And people stay with him. Like back then, I was a sales development representative. I worked with this guy as an account executive, right? I think it's been 4 or 5 years since I've left there. That same guy is still there. And many of my colleagues back then is still there. And that just shows you, right, that when you go back to fundamentals, you don't overhire, you make sure that you aim for good profitability. People stay with you because people are happy. People know that you care for them. People know that, and when you don't have to think so much about, oh my God, am I hitting quota? Am I hitting targets? you actually realize you have a bit more time to slowly manage people and grow people. Because I've been at companies where every single month we are just talking about quotas. It's almost as if we don't hit revenue, everything else is out of the window. You don't even talk about culture, and that's a reality of sales, right? That happens. So how can you actually avoid that? You avoid that by going back to fundamentals, making sure you understand. Yes, while some analysts may say this is how big our target market is, but actually, who can we actually target right now in the next 6 months, the next 12 months? From there, you work out what revenue you could bring, and you work backwards and say, okay, if I'm targeting this revenue, then I just need maybe 1 or 2 sales reps. I don't need too many. So I think that really taught me about fundamentals after fundamentals. Yeah, because sales is at the end of the day is about that. It's just like how when you guys do marketing and all that.
Looks like you've got a really wise boss back then,
Yes.
right? And there are lots of things that myself, like 10 years later, someone told me when I was a little younger as well. And I didn't understand what it meant until much later.
I think that's the thing, right? Like, and probably for you, I mean, you probably would lead very differently now versus when you started your company, yeah. Because you learn those lessons throughout the years.
Yeah. So my very curious questions is, we've talked about some very successful examples, and what are some one thing, what's one bad example or observation that you have made that people have made in expanding, especially from a sales development point of view in APAC, right? Without naming names, of course.
I would say this. I think 2 things, right? Every time I see a new company that is based in the US or again any other region, right, coming to APAC, the first thing I always ask is, what's their total addressable market? Meaning, I'll give classic examples. You have a lot of companies in the US which are selling sales-related tech, which means they're selling to sales teams, more specifically B2B sales teams in software companies. And I've seen companies where they come here and they want to sell sales tech to people here. But then the problem is this. Firstly, you don't have too many B2B software companies here that are of a sizable size. Most of them are small. They use the cheaper alternatives out there. And when you try to bring an enterprise product over here, you realize that your total addressable market is not big. You don't have too many people that you can sell to. Now, once I see that, I then ask myself, what's the rate of their hiring? If I know for a fact that they don't have a big market here, they can't sell to too many people, and even if they sell to sales teams over here, most of sales teams are in US companies, so they can't sell anyway, because you just can't do that. So then they start to hire a lot of people. That's where I know it's potentially a recipe for disaster. Because again, I go back to it, in sales we have this idea, right? Like for most salespeople, and if you ask them, let's say today this is what they're paid. Let's take 100K for example. Some are obviously paid even higher. 100K on target earnings, which is the term that we use for salary. A salesperson typically needs to bring in 4x of that amount or 5x. So if you're paid 200K, you got to bring in $1 million. So every leader who hires a headcount, you are essentially saying, okay, I paid $200 for you, you better bring in $1 million. If you don't bring in that amount, firstly, that person doesn't get to earn his or her commission. Secondly, you as the leader and boss, how do you answer to your boss as well? And yeah, so I think a lot of leaders just do this, right? They just believe that I'm just going to hire a bunch of people, things will work out. But again, they don't go back to fundamentals like, how big is the total addressable market? Can I actually sell to, hypothetically, if I sell to everyone here that I can sell to, what is the total size? So I think it all goes back to that. Hiring too quickly, no understanding fundamentals.
Okay, awesome. I think we've kind of learned quite a little bit from you, from a sales and go-to-market approach and the different cultural nuances. And maybe you would like to share a little bit more about what revenue journey does.
Yeah. So I'll share a bit about revenue journey. At the end of the day, we are a go-to-market consultancy, operations consultancy, right, and a B2B growth partner. So what that means is taking my experience from being in lending team, trying to build up processes for myself, trying to get first few clients. Now I want to help other companies do the same. And I'm not just talking about strategy, but I'm also talking about if today you need someone to help you with very basic things like lead generation, understand what's your total addressable market, building out workflows that help your sales team sell better, sell easier. Yeah, we do that. We do that obviously with modern tools. And I believe when you have technology, you have right people, right process, PPP, right? People, process, product or tech, magic happens.
Right, and thank you. I think magic happened that you're in this studio with us, attending this Scaling Impact. I hope for the guests out here, you've learned something from Asher today as well. Right, thank you so much. Hey, Asher, that was a great session, right? I really enjoyed speaking with you. You had so many interesting nuggets and tidbits that we can take away from. This topic of the diversity of APAC is always the common theme that we have covered in our various series across different leaders and professionals we've sat here. So that must be something true, right? When everyone is saying it, that APAC is so diverse, although there's lots of opportunities as well, right? So it's very critical to do that homework to understand that diversity. So I love Asher's story on how he had a great leader and a mentor who showed him how is it like to actually scale, slowing down so that you can get the right insights and do the right things, not doing everything. As a young person, you like to get and achieve a lot by doing anything and everything, right? But the important lesson is be clear on what you're trying to achieve and what is the goal and how your strategy in the market expansion team doesn't always necessarily have to align 100% with what Higher HQ exactly does. They already have a product market fit there. So you've got to figure out what works for you in this particular market because there's so many factors that could be different. And I love his other stories where he speaks from first-hand experience as well, how he saw the experience of a winning team and how he saw experience of something that we all could learn from, right? So I had a brilliant session with Asher. So I believe let's start taking some questions from our users today. So some of you who are already on the call, please drop your questions and comments and we'll try to answer you as to the best of what we can. I had a revelation when I was speaking to Asher about culture and how culture could be so different, especially he saw with first-hand experience and that this session with Asher is he's speaking from first-hand experience and how he worked with Higher HQ and so much of a team dynamics that can be different. And culture building is also quite crucial as you're building up your new team in this part of the world, right? So we've gotten some questions coming in. So I believe the first question here is for Aoya. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. So for a company that's perhaps smaller, has limited resources for extensive on-the-ground research, what are some practical, cost-effective first steps that they can gain, they can take to gain local insights beyond just market reports before making a significant investment? Talk to people. It's not about reports. It's not about insights from whoever published this. Talk to people on the ground, which is why if you are intending to expand in the local market, have someone on your team. You don't have to be a permanent hire. It can be a consultant like someone like Colin or even Asher. There are great consultants at different price points be transparent. Sometimes you can structure a deal, right, where there is obviously a paid amount and others. But I'll leave you, if you like to, drop a note and we can link you up with both Colin or Asher. And we have got other seasoned professionals within our roster of people we have interviewed as well, who could be a great fit for you. So talk to them, get them to speak with your desired customers or even local partners. Like I think we've mentioned in quite a few series or episodes as well. It is quite different for both, for various markets. It's quite different for various markets, how you need to approach your go-to market. So like Indonesia, like we have covered a few episodes ago, is all about having that local partner. So get hold of a local partner to speak with and understand the market in that sense before you actually make significant investments. In fact, I would ask you to reconsider making that significant investments, get a quick win, land some quick deals before even having your first hire. That's entirely possible. Okay, so Terry shared about the example of the business leader who started with customer success managers. Sounds very sustainable. Indeed it is. Yeah, but however, if a business is in a competitive and fast-moving sector, how can they balance this cautious approach with the need to scale sales aggressively by capturing more market share? So I'm going to kind of paraphrase what Asher shared and give you the same answer, right? On one hand, you feel that you want to scale very quickly, you want to run, and you want to just capture the sales. But if your foundations are not right, you can get hold of all the sales you want, and your back end, your support systems, your servicing team is not ready, it's all going to come crashing down, right? So you can land all the sales you want, they are not going to stick with you because you're not able to support them well in the long run. And in the longer run, your brand reputation might suffer in this market. So having that foundation right, build it up properly before you multiply your sales. And once your playbook and your messaging is done right, sales can be multiplied very, very quickly, right? But never ever do that way if your foundations are not great, especially if you are in a business that needs a separate servicing or support team to put in place in market. Right, so I hope that clarifies, although it's probably a lot more of the same thing that Asher kind of already mentioned. So building up your foundations, make sure everything is good and fits, and then build your sales team from there. Okay, I believe that's the last question I have seen. So thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of Scaling in APAC. So on your screen somewhere, you should be seeing a poll coming up. So help us make the next event better by giving us some of your feedback. If you are interested in what we have shared today, please be sure to follow our socials for more information about upcoming episodes. So join us for another exciting episodes of Scaling in APAC in June. So Colin, I hope you'll be back. You should be watching this even while you're sick, right? So please come back in June. I hope to have this great conversation with you as well. Right, so thank you everyone and see you in the next episode.